Wow. Welcome all again. Another great segment. Gunning to Old Trafford. Guys, don't forget to like, comment, hit that bell notification and subscribe. I am in the capable, and wow. I mean, great things. As you guys can see, we've got Doc on the special seat and Ibrahim, and we are all glazers out. Ibrahim, bring us in.
I love that, Doc and I both wearing the green and gold,
so smart, beautiful, man.
And Doc, this is an image that, really, started getting behind the whole glazers out movement,
Yeah.
the green and gold.
Yes.
But before we get into that, guys, again, second segment with Dr. Barry Shmeizer, avid, lifelong Manchester United fan, renowned gastroenterologist, chairman of the official Manchester United Supporters Club in South Africa, and an all-round fantastic person. And Doc,
Wow.
thanks for the hospitality. Thanks for the hospitality. It's been amazing.
With compliments like that, you can come every day. Yes.
Guys, if you don't know, any of you guys can see Ibrahim is in cloud 9 today. This is absolutely amazing afternoon. So yeah, Ibi, take us in.
Brilliant. Doc, I think, it's a with the shirts that we have on, perfect time to talk about it. Glazers and their ownership of Manchester United.
Yeah.
Obviously, the way they bought Manchester United, the English League, the FA, have now put fail-safes to make sure it doesn't happen again. But what's been your thoughts around their ownership from the time they took over, 2005, so it's now 17 years, how Sir Alex, papered over the cracks, and the ownership model or the structure, we mentioned the previous time, Ed Woodward taking over David Gill, your overall thoughts, and then we'll jump into the news around him selling.
Yeah. So I think if one goes back to when the Glazers purchased United were a public company, and there was a large stock held by two well-known Irish businessmen, Magnier and McManus. Mm-hmm. And they had entered into some sort of partnership with Fergie with respect to a racehorse. And there was, can we blame all that's going on this racehorse? Maybe we can. Because there was a tremendous fallout in terms of ownership of this horse. And this irritated the two Irish fellows. And what they did was they put their stock up for sale, or they offered it to the Glazers, which made the Glazers majority shareholders and in place for a hostile takeover, which is what they did. Now, when the Glazers took it over, a lot of the deal was brokered by Ed Woodward and his fellow merchant bankers. Guys like Matt Judge, Richard Arnold, that's the triumvirate from Bristol University, and they all went on to work for, I think, PwC or one of those companies. So you had banking men, brilliant banking men. Now, when Fergie and David Gill were there, they were able to carry on, from 2005 to 2013. I don't think that we raised much of an eyebrow against the Glazers, although a lot of locally based supporters were totally opposed to it from the get-go.
They could see what was
because
coming.
their feeling was it's a family club, there's a lot of traditions, should be owned by the supporters, and now the Americans are here, etc. But I think that David Gill performed a massive role, which we underestimate, because he was able, I think, to facilitate a lot of the deals that Fergie wanted done, and thus it kind of papered things over.
Correct.
But then United lost Fergie and David Gill simultaneously, and suddenly you have Ed Woodward, the man calling the shots. And Ed Woodward and his cronies, over the years, rewarded players with extended contracts with the premise that the player will be worth more if his contract is longer, which is absolutely ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Now, let's take as an example, and he's always the fall guy, Phil Jones. Phil Jones is still at Man United, courtesy of Ed Woodward.
Amazing contract they gave him, huh?
He's drawing a fat salary. He doesn't kick a ball.
Yeah.
He hasn't kicked a ball for ages. Yes, he's had injury problems. One feels sorry for him. But that's a typical example. And contracts being extended. And then contracts for commercial gain. Alexis Sanchez, a
yes.
typical
It
example.
was definitely.
Angel Di Maria, who, I mean, we were delighted when they signed these players. They looked fantastic in their previous clubs. But clearly they were extremely unhappy with their situations in Manchester. We signed, albeit on a so-called free transfer, Falcao, who was obviously injured. And then, of course, you've got a manager who is virtually like a puppet unless he wants to stand up against the board, and we all know how that ends. So that saw the end of Mourinho. The co-opting of David Moyes, I think, was absolutely disastrous. David Moyes is a great manager for teams like Preston and Everton and West Ham. No disrespect to those teams because he's done well at them. But the job is too big. I mean, he looked like a deer in the headlights. And when he starts making comments, I'm going to make it as difficult for the opponents as possible or whatever. I mean, what kind of a thing? We're Man United. We've won the game in the tunnel usually, you know. So that didn't sit well. Louis van Gaal, little bit of an unknown quantity because we hated the football under him. Yet the guy got fired on the day that he wins the FA Cup.
And I was there for the FA Cup final, Doc.
I saw you there. I remember it very well.
Were you there as well?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yes. My record in FA Cup finals is bad. I've played 7 and lost 4.
Okay.
So luckily, so I brought the
brought the
luck
good
on
luck.
the day.
You brought the good luck. So therein, and then comes Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Now, he to me was a mystery. I could not believe that they brought him in as the coach.
I understood as interim, as a, you know, the gap when Mourinho went out, but to appoint him permanently.
Yes, well, you know, all the pundits were calling for him to be appointed permanently when we beat PSG and we had some really good results. But the thing is, the guy's a manager. He managed Mould to a league championship. He failed dismally at Cardiff. Fergie always said that he was managerial material because he used to analyse the game. He could come off the bench and affect the game, etc. And, I mean, I found his post-match interviews horrific. But that's taking away from the Glazers because when you look at what the Glazers' plan is, the amount of money they paid for the club is still owed. They financed the debt from the club. Now, I know very little about finance, but they've plundered, depending on whose work you believe, £1 to £2 billion out of the club. Funds that could have been spent on building a new stadium, improving the training facilities. So for them, bottom line is money. Exactly. And what do? They put a board in place that listens to them. You daren't, if you're on the board and you want to oppose them, you'll be kicked out. If you're the manager and you want to oppose the board, you'll be kicked out.
And we've seen that with Ralph Rangnick,
Yeah. And, you know, nice work if you can get it, because it's a few £1 million a season.
Exactly.
And the other thing is player power. If the players don't like you as the manager, you've got a big problem. They all earn more than you do, or most of them do, and they can get you out. But the club has been rotten under the Glazers. And I just hope that we find new financiers. If you had to ask me of all the names that have been mooted, the one that appeals the most, and I don't speak from authority, is Jim Ratcliffe, because he's an avid United fan. And you want, let them run it as a business. I mean, after all, they're forking out a hell of a lot of money. But let them run it as a football business that they're passionate about football and they want to see results for us, the fans. So that is what I would like to see happen. My biggest fear is that the Glazers will co-opt some lesser stakeholders to put more money in the club, and I really hope that doesn't happen. And at the moment, you know, the rumour mill is in full flow.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, all of the businesses, I mean, Apple, Amazon, they've all been linked with Manchester United. And obviously, you know, your usual suspects, Arab money, it's been linked as well. So, Doc, when it comes to the Glazers putting Manchester United up for sale, what do you think? Because a lot of people think it's because of the protest, but I think the Glazers have thick skin. They don't care about the noise. For me personally, the reason why they put the club up for sale is because they realize now this cash cow that they were milking all of these years has run dry, and they're going to have to start putting money back in. Is that some
I think you've got a valid point there. They're thick-skinned. I mean, they're hardly ever and probably, I don't say this with great pride, but I met 2 of the Glazer brothers, Joel and Avram, once at Carrington, and we're standing and watching the training, and all they could talk about was the weather in Manchester compared to that in Miami. So, I don't know that they know the difference between, I don't know, David Beckham and Peter Schmeichel. So, they're certainly not football men. They're American businessmen.
Yeah.
But sport has become a massive business. We can't get away from that. You go to Old Trafford on a Wednesday night, half the crowd are in Armani suits as guests of sponsors and things like that, So the Saturday afternoon football supporter has largely been disregarded. And that needs, I would love to see that change. And that's why if you look at small clubs in England, the town gets behind them. They're not aspiring to winning Champions Leagues. This is a totally different ball game.
Yep.
Yeah, totally different.
100%. Doc, in an ideal world, and you mentioned Jim Ratcliffe, not saying which company or which consortium should take over, but ideally, what would you like to see from a Manchester United ownership, a new ownership model coming in?
I'd like to see more effort put on the football side of things. I'd like to see a board that is made up of football people. And I'd probably like to see maybe a couple of the ex-players brought in at a slightly senior level. Now, I don't know who those would be. You've got the class of 92 involved with Salford United. I don't know that they'd be the people. You've got David Beckham is the face of 150 different companies. I mean, the guy's like a chameleon, So I don't know. But if you look, for me, the perfect model of a football club is Bayern Munich.
Yes.
I think that's the perfect model.
Amazing. And they've got a lot of fan involvement in their decision making, which is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the Glazers promised these interactions with the fans and that more than a year ago. And personally, I would love to have seen a walkout from Old Trafford.
Yeah.
But if I'm in the crowd and I've travelled there from South Africa, someone says to me, don't go to the game or walk out at half time. If they said to me, walk out after 92 minutes, maybe, although in Fergie time, we would probably still win the match. But now we're in Ten Hag time.
Exactly. And I mean, the fans at the stadium did really well to stop the United-Liverpool game a couple of seasons back.
Yeah.
And I think that made the Glazers sit up a bit. But that was more in protest to the Super League or...
Yes.
And then, again, that's when all of these fake promises came up from the Glazers. And like we said, fake promises, nothing transpired.
That's all
from
it is, yeah.
Perfect stuff.
Wow, brilliant. So, Doc, that was brilliant. Glazers out today, Glazers out tomorrow, and Glazers out...
Glazers out yesterday.
Glazers out, exactly. So, Doc, we're going to jump into quickly none other than Cristiano Ronaldo. Obviously, released by Manchester United. What's your take on this whole saga? Do you think it could have been handled differently?
Definitely.
And obviously, his first spell at Manchester United compared to his second spell at Manchester United. What's your take on that?
All right, so you can look at this in many different ways. As far as his first spell at Man United is concerned, he was there for 6 seasons. The second 3 of those 6 were absolutely sublime. Absolutely sublime.
Crazy.
I think my statistics are right. He scored in his first stint at United 118 goals. 92 of them came in the seasons 4, 5 and 6.
Yeah.
So he grew as a player unbelievably. Absolutely unbelievably. And one could see this. You saw this thin wisp of a guy develop into this physical specimen. And just a joy to watch. And if you listen to all his teammates of the time, they all say how dedicated he was to training, how he used to say he wants to be the best player in the world, and they used to mock him about that. And I have to say that in my privileged times of watching training at Carrington, he was the last guy off the training pitch every single time. So you have that Ronaldo, and you have the Ronaldo that when he was at United, until the first talk of him going to Real Madrid, I never thought of, this guy aspires to becoming a Real Madrid player. And I think the magnificence of Ronaldo really came out at Real Madrid, where, he averaged more than a goal a game. He was absolutely sublime.
Phenomenal.
And then he takes on the next challenge of going to Juventus, where it's harder to score goals. Yet he takes that on and he does unbelievably. Right. So when rumblings started that Ronaldo is going to come back to Man United, I was in the minority. I always thought, I want to remember him for when he was there. I don't want him back at United. But in all honesty, when he came back, I was not displeased.
And that goes for him.
I was not
rivals
displeased.
I was excited.
So he comes back to United. Now you got to think, take a guy like Cavani. The season before Ronaldo came back, Cavani was brilliant.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now Ronaldo's coming back, you're being told, listen, you've got to give up your number 7 shirt. Now, I don't know how that sits with a guy like Cavani, but potentially disharmony in the dressing room. I don't know. And now you're bringing a guy back, and are you going to make him fit in with the style of play, or are you going to make the rest of the team fit in with him? But the first season back, he scores 24 goals, a lot of very important goals, especially in the Champions League, couple of hat-tricks, great hat-trick against Spurs.
Yeah, brilliant.
So everything's rosy. Now comes social media. Who do I believe? Because at the end of last season, starts the talk he wants to leave the club. Now, is this right or is it wrong? I don't know. I haven't heard it from his mouth. I haven't heard it from the manager. And clearly, he's signing on with shirt sales. I mean, the shirt sales, they recoup the money, his salary and everything like that. The Glazers I'm not crying a single tear for. Not a single tear. So now, I don't know who to believe. And obviously, things are not right over there. If you watch the guy, his body language, he's so frustrated. Yes, some of the time, the ball isn't given to him. Two schools of thought. You get the Keenan Ferdinands who say, you got to treat the guy with kid gloves. He's the greatest player. Well, he's not the greatest player in the world now. He may have been. And of course, there's always this comparison, Ronaldo, Messi. My take on that, let's be grateful we saw both of them.
Exactly.
I agree with you.
So who do you believe? And then you've got the Gary Neville, Paul Scholes faction of no one's bigger than the club. Get him out the club. So I just don't know who to believe. Then you have this debacle with Piers Morgan that I have to say, I'm ashamed of myself for listening to that interview.
Yeah, exactly.
It is without doubt the worst interview I have ever heard. Was it orchestrated by Ronaldo? That's what Piers says. I don't know if that's the case. If this was in a court of law and I was the opposing counsel, I would say to the judge that my opposing counsel is leading the witness.
Yeah.
I found that Piers Morgan was answering the question for him.
Exactly.
And
asking him for his view on it.
Yeah. So I hated that interview and I learned nothing from that interview. Because he'd said already that he's got no respect for the manager and things like that. Now, if this is Fergie time, boy, you are gone. You are on your ear. You're gone. And I think that the manager has to make a statement with respect to this in terms of, well, the club have made a statement. And I was quite impressed with the speed of the statement.
It was.
Because they came out and said that they're taking this on board and they will only release a statement once they have finalised their decision. I somehow think the decision was finalised before this interview even happened. So we will never, ever know the facts behind this. At this point in time, am I pleased that he's left the club? Yes. Do I think that he's tarnished his legacy? I would look back on him as being fantastic when he was there in that first time. This has been, it's human frailties. The guy's got an ego. It seems more important to him how many shirts get sold or how many millions he's got in the bank as to his team. So I don't really know. But we need to move forward.
Exactly.
And
I think Ronaldo, on that point, Doc, Ronaldo was the past for Manchester United.
Yes.
And now we need to look at how do we bring the best out of this club and take them back to where they were.
And what's intriguing is where does he go next?
And that's going to be exciting.
I have no doubt that he knows where he's going next,
exactly.
but I don't know.
Well, the best question of the interview was, will Arsenal be winning the league? And the answer was the best answer of the whole thing. First Manchester United, but he wants Arsenal to win the league. So that was the best question and answer.
Yes.
So,
you see, we find Arsenal a bit less bland than Liverpool and Man City.
Yes,
so,
true that.
Like, okay.
Doc, question to you. And I'm going to bring a little bit of Arsenal in. How are they looking, and do you think they can really, really go for the title this season?
Man United, yes.
I like the answer.
Lovely.
Arsenal. I have to say that I found Arsenal's football this season extremely entertaining. They've stuck by their manager, young manager, who I think has probably learnt a fortune from Pep.
Definitely, yes.
He's got his own ideas. I think that he handled Aubameyang very well.
Brilliantly, yeah.
And they're good on the eye. Is their squad deep enough to sustain injuries to key players? We'll have to see. If Man United aren't going to win the league, would I mind if Arsenal won the league? Well, Man United aren't going to win the league. Let's scrap the league.
I second that. And I think Uncle Yunus behind the camera will also put his hand up for that.
It's okay. But you know what? End of the day, like with this World Cup, when I've been asked, who do I want to win the World Cup? I say, at the end of the World Cup, I want to be able to turn around and say that they deserve to win it because they've entertained us the best.
Yeah.
And at the moment, Arsenal are playing extremely entertaining football, but it's a very combative league. Very unpredictable. And also fixture build-up, for teams involved in Europe, etc. Yes, Arsenal involved in Europa League, so they have the luxury of being able to play some of their sort of fringe players. Plus, did they top their group or did they come second?
They topped it.
Yeah, so they don't have this.
The playoff.
Because we've got to whip Barcelona.
But that's what we look for, right? If you want to be in the Champions League, you want to play the biggest club. So
we'll thrash Barcelona.
we got a saying.
If Rob Hyman was around, Rob Hyman would say, we'll beat them 10-0.
Doc, we have a saying on gunning to Old Trafford that Thursday night football is the most important football that you watch. It's a Europa League, so that's what we're going for.
Yeah, unfortunately, the spin-off of Thursday night football is Sunday football.
Yeah.
And if one's having a bad weekend and your team loses on Sunday, oh man.
It's a terrible week to look forward to, unfortunately.
Awesome, man.
Doc, before we get into your all-time 11, and this is the segment, it's not something that I thought I'd ask, but I think I have to. In a recent interview, Rio Ferdinand and Pep, that question always comes up: Scholes, Gerrard, or Lampard? And Pep answered it really, really well. Your view, and not discounting any of them, but if you had to choose one, and taking your United bias out of it, between the three, who would you go for?
It's a no-brainer. It's Scholes.
Scholesy, yes.
Scholes.
Scholesy all the way.
I do think that Paul Scholes, by many supporters, was underappreciated while he was there. And I think the best idea you get is hearing fellow professionals talk. But I mean, what a trio of players. Those are...
Amazing.
And the amazing thing is how England could not perform well with the three of them. But look, Lampard, goal-scoring machine.
Yeah.
Gerrard, inspirational. Wonderful players. Wonderful.
Players.
So, there's not a lot between them. But listen, Scholesy, I think 11 premiership medals. 10 or 11. What a player. Dictated, you get to, I think as one, you will know as a coach, when someone talks about someone dictating the tempo of a game, there are not many players that can do that.
No, exactly. You don't get that. You don't.
And I think all three of those guys could do it.
They could turn a match just as they
all
want.
Good goal scorers. And I'm amazed at how many goals Scholes scored with his head, being a small
guy. Yeah, he scored some amazing headers.
Yeah, beautiful.
Doc, what you're saying, Uncle Yunus gave us a bit of an anecdote when he watched the game in Marseille. Yes. A really boring game until Scholes came on in the last 20 minutes, and you just saw the quality of the game increase. And it's on tune with what you're saying.
It's amazing how one player can just change the whole pattern of the game.
Yeah. Amazing.
And I suppose that's what you rely on your midfielders to do.
And aging Paul Scholes was actually the reason why Paul Pogba, one of the reasons why Paul Pogba couldn't make it in the Manchester United team at the time, and eventually left for Juventus.
You see, if you go back to this debacle with Pogba, you may remember a game in the season, it was the 2010 season. We lost 3-2 at home to Blackburn. They were bottom of the league. Mm-hmm. Ferguson disciplined, he dropped Wayne Rooney for that game for some reason. And Scholes was injured. and he brought in one of the De Silvas and not Pogba. And that's when everything started happening and Pogba left.
Yeah, exactly.
And look, we were happy when he came back, but sure. I
Disappointment.
think you can count on the fingers of these two hands the number of games he influenced.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, one comes to mind, the City game when we were 2-0
Yeah.
down. But like you say, I mean, a very underwhelming return to Manchester United.
And look what's happened to him now.
Exactly.
Maybe it's the witch doctor curse. I don't know.
The hyena, you know, as his brother said, the hyena buried at Old Trafford.
Yeah.
I think this is a perfect time now to segue into
To our
Doc's top 11. But Doc,
Top 11.
I mean, watching through the Busby era, all of the coaches, and in the Alex Ferguson era, Sir Alex Ferguson era, I think it will be difficult for us to tell you to choose one 11. So maybe choose an era, Doc,
Yeah.
and then we work
I
through
think
an
we have to
11.
do it like that, you know, because as I've alluded to, there's the Busby era, there's the Ferguson era. Nowadays, we've got footage on the modern player. You can see a million different angles. Everything. You know, that era, there's no footage. So if you are not alive to actually watch them play, you've got to rely on anecdotes of others. You know, and my knowledge of the history of the club does not go back very well before the Second World War. So I can't really comment on players like Billy Meredith and Henry Cockburn and Alex Turnbull and players like that, you know. So we'll keep them out of the equation, you know. We'll keep them out of the equation. It's much easier making an 11, or my 11, out of Fergie's time. But again, it is so difficult in terms of people you leave out. So I might change it slightly as I'm going along.
Brilliant.
So in Fergie's time, goalkeeper. So there's Schmeichel, there's Van der Sar. Schmeichel, shot stopper, sublime. Van der Sar, probably a little bit better at distribution than Schmeichel, but I'll go with Schmeichel. Right.
From a formation
So, Doc,
perspective, Doc.
Yeah.
Okay, so Doc,
Right.
this is our special black book.
Right,
Once you tell us
right.
your
I'm
position,
not allowed to change.
you're
No,
not
we
gonna
will allow
change
you to
any-
change,
But
Doc.
for you, okay, you can change.
Okay.
But once we note it down, it will be locked in, and you will be allowed only 3 substitutions.
Okay.
So you can change it anytime. No, sorry. For the World Cup, they say they're allowing 5
Five
substitutions.
Now,
Only give you 5.
are these 5 on the bench?
No. So you could change him if you want. If you make a mistake, we'll give you 5.
So I've just
5
got to give you
changes.
11 players, no
No,
substitute?
no,
you
you're getting
should be
subs, Doc. You're
Okay.
getting subs.
All right.
Okay,
5
so-
subs.
Sure.
Beautiful stuff.
Okay,
Well,
right.
to start, before we even get into it, before, we used to go for a flat 4-4-2.
Yeah.
But then we had a guest coming on, and he changed that entire mix, and he came
Right.
with his own 4-2-3-1 formation.
Right.
So, Doc, we're going to give you the opportunity to choose a formation.
I'm going with 4-4-2.
I love it.
Brilliant.
I love
Brilliant.
the standard
Right,
4-4-2. I love it.
Okay, so we've got Schmeichel in
Impulse.
goals. Okay.
And then we look at that
So
spine.
now you've got to look at the spine of the team. And the spine of the team, for me, you've got to get centre-backs that complement each other.
100%.
So do you go for Bruce and Pallister? Do you go for Stam and Jonsson? Or do you go for Ferdinand and Vidic? Now, I've noticed a lot of people go for Ferdinand and Stam. But Stam was at United only for 3 seasons. And again, another bad story with how things ended, because he went on to have a great career. But I'll go with Ferdinand and Vidic because they complement each other.
Brilliant.
Rio, as far as I can remember, only got 1 red card. It was when Robbie Savage irritated him playing against Blackburn. And Rio Shorts never used to be dirty at the end of the game because he read the game so well. Great ball player. And Vidic was just a beast.
warrior.
An absolute beast. So they complemented each
And a
other.
certain Lisandro Martinez brings a little bit of...
A little bit, but
Not too
early
much.
days still.
Yeah, early days.
But he looks the real deal.
He looks
I
the real
like
deal.
him.
The
Yeah.
butcher of
Yeah.
the butcher of Manchester.
Yeah,
Butcher.
but you see, it's not good to have a name like that, the butcher, because the referees...
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, they're on your case.
They're on your case. The cards start flying.
Yeah. And talking of that, it's also not a good nickname to have in the medical world.
Oh, yes. Do that. It's so true.
Yes.
So let's try to keep it away from
Alright.
the butcher of
Let's
Manchester.
just the butcher of Manchester, yeah.
So we'll go with Rio and Vidic.
Brilliant, love that.
The fullbacks, I think, in the Fergie era really choose themselves. The only slight argument, some would like to see Patrice Evra inside there. But for me, the first fullback on the list is Dennis Irwin
Oh, yes.
at left back.
Oh, yes.
And I would put Gary Neville at right back.
I think Neville
And-
speaks himself, right, for the
Yeah,
position.
Gary Neville, on his own admission, was not the most talented
Yeah.
player, but an extremely hard-working player and a good leader. And he just he would do anything for that club.
And
he
still
was
loves
great.
Manchester United.
Still
through and
loves
through.
them, and knew exactly when his time was up.
Yeah.
In fact, he always says he should have retired the game before he retired it. So.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of good work down the right wing in combination with Beckham.
Yeah, amazing.
Okay, so now the 4 midfielders. So I'm going to go for 2 wide midfielders and 2 central midfielders,
Okay,
and they're
lovely.
going to surprise you.
Okay.
Because the first central midfielder is Paul Scholes. No discussion,
Speaks himself.
he's there. But then comes the dilemma, Keane or Robson.
That's a
You
tough
see?
one, Doc.
That is a tough one. And I include Robson in the Fergie era because he was at United. Fergie came in 86.
Yeah.
Robbo was still there. Robson left just after the
Ferguson
94.
said the biggest mistake he made, or regret he has, not mistake, but biggest regret was leaving Robbo out of the FA Cup
The
final.
cup final, he could have at least named him as a substitute.
Exactly.
That was not nice.
After everything Robson did for
That
Manchester
was,
United.
But the thing is, it's the same thing. He left Park Ji-sung out of the 2008 Champions League.
Yes.
All right, so I go with Robson, not Keane.
Old school Brian Robson.
Yeah, I'll go with Robson.
And it's a tough
Wow.
one, Robson
It's
and
a very
Keane.
tough
And I
one.
think them playing in the same team also, loggerheads,
Yeah.
Robson and Keane.
Yeah, you've got to, Keane in his early days was a box-to-box midfielder.
Mm-hmm.
After he got his knee injury, he was further back.
Yes.
If I was choosing a kind of 4-2-3-1 Keane, but
Keane
for
would
me, I just prefer Robson.
Brilliant.
I-
And this is
I'll
your
go with
11, Doc,
Robson. This is
so
I
we
go,
go
with
with
Robson,
Love it.
and Robson captains my team.
Oh wow. Captain, my captain.
Right.
Brian Robson.
Right. Now comes part of the difficult part. Right wing. Okay.
Tough one.
Right. So it is a tough one, and again might not be such a popular one, but I'm going with Beckham.
Oh, David Beckham.
Doc, you'll be surprised how
Yeah.
popular
Yeah.
it is.
And I'm going with Beckham because him and Gary Neville, great understanding,
Yeah.
and Beckham, the best crosser of a ball
Oh,
I have
yes.
ever seen.
Oh yes.
I've ever seen, and that'll impact on who I have as my strikers.
Okay.
So I have him in the right wing slot. Now the left wing slot becomes a difficult one. Do I take Ryan Giggs based on his longevity? I have to say, being very critical, Ryan Giggs in his last few seasons reinvented himself as a
Yes,
different kind of midfielder. He'd lost a yard of space, but Ryan Giggs in his first few
Oh,
seasons
yeah,
was
he was
electrical, was
amazing.
unbelievable. Or do I have to find a slot for Ronaldo, maybe on that left-hand side, you see? So if I've got Ronaldo on the left, I've got the luxury of these 2 midfield players, these central midfield players that are just so good. Ronaldo or Giggs on the left?
What a choice to be made.
What a
the
choice
luxury,
to be
it's
made.
amazing.
What a choice to be made. I am going with Ronaldo.
Ah, Cristiano Ronaldo. You makes it.
Okay? Despite all that's gone on recently,
yeah.
I'm going with Ronaldo. Right.
And I love that, Doc, what's happened now doesn't tarnish who Ronaldo was
No.
for Manchester United. That's amazing.
Then my 2
Up
strikers.
front, that's going to be important.
No-brainer. Ruud van Nistelrooy, first striker, because Beckham will feed him.
Oh yes.
Yes, we know there's some bad vibes between him and Ronaldo, but we rely on our manager to sort that
Exactly.
out. And then the one other place, and you see, a lot of people go for Eric Cantona. I'll go for Rooney.
Rooney.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I'll go for Rooney because he's such a workaholic.
Yeah.
And if that team comes under pressure, Rooney can go back in the midfield and help Robson over there because Rooney was the epitome of a team player.
100%.
He would play in any position.
This is a beautiful story.
And Zlatan said the same.
That's my team. That
Wow.
team would slaughter anybody.
Wow.
The only team they might struggle against is the Busby 11 that I'm going to choose.
Oh, nice. I like to hear this Busby 11. So, Doc,
And now I've got subs.
on before we get into your subs, on Rooney, Zlatan obviously played for United for a small stint, said that any player that played with Rooney looked a much better player because Rooney did all of the dirty work and allowed them to take
so
the
hard
headlines.
working. So hard working. And United have had some wonderful cameos. I mean, it's such a pity that Zlatan got injured.
Yeah.
He was great.
Brilliant
Van
pass.
Persie was great.
Oh.
You know, I mean, these are just iconic
You're spoiled
players.
for choice, Doc.
They are
Spoiled for
iconic
choice.
players, you know.
Awesome.
So I'm allowed 5 subs.
5 subs, Doc.
That's
Is
your-
one a goalkeeper?
One is a
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so we'll have Van der Sar on the
Van der
bench.
Sar, beautiful.
And then the next 4 is up to you to decide how you
Okay.
want to structure your team.
We'll have Jaap Stam on the bench.
Oh, we upstand loving.
We'll have Roy Keane on the bench. That's 3.
That's
2 more.
2 more.
We'll have Cantona on the bench.
What a
And then I
bench.
have to, oh my word.
And we'll have Giggs on the bench.
I mean, I can just imagine the arguments happening on that bench. Stam, Kentona and Keane. When the team are not doing well and the coach is taking time to make the subs, you can just
Yeah.
hear the noise coming from.
You talk about
Wow.
the Springbok bomb squad. This is a bomb squad. Yeah.
No, brilliant. And I don't think, I think there's only one man that can really
Awesome.
coach a team like this. And I think I'm going to do it.
Fergie.
Sir Alex Ferguson.
Sir
Well,
Alex
it's,
Sir Alex
it's
Ferguson.
between him and Moyes, and I can't go
Okay,
for
yeah, we'd rather be safe. Let's go with
I'll go
Sir
with
Alex
Fergie.
Ferguson. Oh, that's amazing. Let's run through it. Ladies and gentlemen, a bomber squad. We've got Peter Schmeichel in the poles. Our 2 centre backs, Rio Ferdinand, Emmanuel Vidic. Left back, we've got Dennis Irwin. Right back, Gary Neville. Brilliant stuff. In the centre of the park, we have Brian Robson, Paul Scholes. Brian Robson will be captaining the squad. What a captain. On the left wing, we've got Cristiano Ronaldo. And on the right wing, none other than one of my favorite players as well, David Beckham. And up front, reading the line, we've got Wayne Rooney, Ruud van Nistelrooy. What an 11. And on the bench, we've got Edwin van der Sar, Jaap Stam, Roy Keane, Eric Cantona, and Ryan Giggs. And obviously, Sir Alex Ferguson. Wow. That was amazing.
With me as his assistant.
With Doc as the assistant.
With the dog as his assistant. Brilliant stuff.
I'll open the chewing gum for you.
Oh, yes,
I
those
love
were good
that.
days. Good days.
Doc, so this is the Ferguson era.
Yeah,
Do you want to jump into your Busby era as well?
yeah.
That would be brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I think a Busby 11. So Doc, here, obviously, we wouldn't know many of the players.
Yeah, so I can build us
But
to
you'll
you.
have to get
build us
So
to
we're
you.
going to rely on you here for
I've
your...
Eunice checking on me.
Can I throw in a spin off though? And I don't know, I should have done this off air. Okay, Lunas, you want to join us for this one? Okay, I'll give you this. Okay, done. Okay, so Busby, the Busby babes.
So let Busby stop 11.
Remember, yeah, so remember, it's not only, they called them always the Busby babes, and in fact, even Sammy McElroy was referred to as the last of the Busby babes,
Yeah.
you know, because he came through when Sir Matt was still the manager.
Awesome.
In fact, in a legendary game, Sammy McElroy made his debut at 17 against Manchester City, and George Best promised him that if he scored a goal, he'd buy him a big bottle of champagne. You know, today the guy would buy him a Ferrari or something like that. But lo and behold, Sammy McElroy scored in that game in a 3-3 draw at Main Road.
Oh wow, and I hope you got his champagne.
He did.
You did? Wow.
That's amazing.
All right,
George Best.
so for this one, I've got to be kind of, you're going to have to slot them in as we go along, because
Sure,
I haven't
sure.
really given this much thought. But when we come to the Busby era, right, so the goalkeeper is going to be Alex Stepney.
Oh, yes.
Because Stepney, in fact, as a goalkeeper, had the greatest longevity at United. He's played 535 games. David De Gea might catch him up
Yes.
if he remains for another couple of seasons. Okay.
Doc, Jack Crompton, any
Well,
memories of him?
Jack Crompton was the goalkeeper in the 1948 Cup final, and he went on to become a coach at Man United. But the other one that could contend with Alex Stepney is Harry Gregg. And Harry Gregg, of course, referred to as the hero of Munich, because not only did he survive the air crash, but he ran back into the plane and pulled out several
100%.
people, and he's really regarded as a great. And in fact, Harry Gregg, who's unfortunately passed away, should have been knighted.
Yes.
And there's a great anecdote about Harry Gregg and George Best. When George Best first came to United as a wisp of a lad, and he was training with the first team, on a few occasions he dribbled past Harry Gregg and scored. And it said that Harry Gregg said to him, "If you do that to me once more, I'm going to break your legs."
Show the man the respect, 100%.
Oh man.
Loved it.
Yeah. So we've got Stepney in there. But then I'm going to jump. I'm going to make a 4-3-3, I think.
Okay.
I might change that. But leading the line, you have to have Tommy Taylor.
Tommy Taylor.
Because Tommy Taylor statistically is the highest scoring goals per game in Man United's history. I think I'm right in saying 131 goals in 191 games.
That's amazing.
He beats Ruud van Nistelrooy by 0.01%.
Oh my.
So Tommy Taylor has to be in there.
have that goals per game in that era,
Yeah.
where the defenders
Phenomenal.
used to, I mean, they could get away with
And we're
murder on
going
the
to, it's a
field.
very valid point there, because we're going to talk about
Yeah.
that, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
But Tommy Taylor bought from Barnsley, £29,999. They didn't want to pay £30,000 to put the pressure on him as being the first £30,000 footballer. So they gave £1 to the tea lady at Barnsley.
Oh, man.
So Tommy Taylor leads the line and unfortunately, tragically killed at Munich.
Yeah.
Up front with him, the king, Dennis Law.
Oh, yes.
Unbelievable player, plagued by injuries, unfortunately, in the latter part of his career. And then, of course, George Best. And I could spend the next 3 hours talking about George Best.
Yes.
Because if you watch, and there is decent footage of George Best, bear in mind, the pitches were mud. The ball was as heavy as all hell. And still in those days, the ball had a lace. If you hit at the blooming lace of the ball, you got a permanent mark on your forehead. Okay, the tackle from behind was legal. So they used to kick him to pieces, and he'd come back for more. Brave, unbelievably brave.
Warrior.
Right foot, left foot, headering. Just
Oh, no.
unbelievable. And the shirt, if it rained, your shirt weighed an extra 5 kilograms. And when he used to come up against players like Chopper Harris and Norman Hunter, they wanted to kill him. And he was like a ballerina in mud.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Just unbelievable. Best player I've ever seen. I don't think, I have to say, I don't think Ronaldo and Messi can lick George Best's boots because of the conditions in which he played.
And I think that's
Ronaldo would spend half his life crying on the floor in the mud, and Messi probably adjusting his beard or doing something. But I'm being harsh because they're two of the modern day giants. But George Best, just amazing.
But I think Best as a player, if he had played in this era, would have been phenomenal as well.
Well, on these pitches, and unbelievable.
And with the protection from the refs,
Unbelievable.
would have been amazing.
Unstoppable.
And, you know, I know a couple of guys in Manchester who are very friendly with him. They'd tell me on a Saturday after a game, he'd never talk about the game. Just wanted to be one of the boys. Never talk about the game. You know. And he needed someone to put an arm around him. He needed the right guidance. And
Yeah, it's
just the
unfortunate
club
how that's
crumbled
played
in
out.
front of his eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so those guys, they're automatic selections. Now I've got to trundle through. So we've got to put the great Duncan Edwards into this team. And Duncan Edwards we'll put in the midfield. Okay? And Duncan Edwards was probably Brian Robson and Roy Keane rolled into one.
Oh, man.
That's how good he
What a
is regarded.
description.
When you look at him physically, the guy's a beast, an absolute beast. And he could play anywhere. Could play absolutely anywhere. There's one season, you know, these guys they were in the army, these guys, and they had to play army football. There's one season where Duncan Edwards played, I think, 120 games in one season. He used to go and play for the army in the morning and for the Man United youth team in the afternoon, and then for the first team the next day.
Absolutely
So
amazing.
he was just unbelievable. An unbelievable,
Duncan Edwards.
prodigious player.
And you
Played
say
for
he could have
England.
he could have gone on to be one of the best footballers
Without a
ever.
doubt. Without a doubt. I think I'm right in saying that in the season before he passed away in the Munich air crash, he was runner-up in the European Footballer of the Year. I might be wrong on that, but you may need to check me on that. But he was just an unbelievable player.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to have him in the midfield. Together with him, we've got to have Bobby Charlton.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now, Bobby Charlton, I mean, is Mr. Manchester United.
Mm-hmm.
And there are roots of the Charlton family in Newcastle because Jackie Milburn of Newcastle is Bobby Charlton's uncle.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of pressure on him to join Newcastle initially. But he joined Man United, and, I mean, what a player. 106 caps for England. Was the record England goal scorer until Wayne Rooney beat his record.
Record United goal scorer.
Record United
Until
goal
Rooney
scorer,
broke it.
record United appearances.
Yeah.
And he was changed. He started off as a left winger, then a striker, then a midfielder. So he played everywhere.
Amazing.
A bullet
Versatile
of a shot.
player, yep.
Bullet of a shot. Wonderful player.
Wow, Bobby
So he's got to go into the midfield.
Awesome.
So we've got Bobby Charlton, we've got Duncan Edwards in midfield.
Who
The
finishes
other
up in
midfield, I've got to think, I never saw him play, but it's either got to be Eddie Coleman, another victim of the Munich air crash, or Paddy Crerand. Now, in Duncan Edwards, you've already got a beast in midfield. But I think I would probably put Paddy Crerand in there as well. You know, the joke goes that Paddy could start an argument in an empty room. He was a really combative fellow, you know, from the Gorbals in Glasgow.
Wow.
And that. So I would put Paddy in there.
That's
So that would
amazing.
be my midfield three.
Amazing.
Then going to the back four, gentleman Johnny Carey, right back.
Right.
He was,
Carey.
Johnny
Doc, if you
Carey.
want to just maybe talk a little
Yeah.
bit about him.
So
because
Johnny
I think a lot
Carey-
of the viewers, this will be
they
good
won't
for
know.
them, you know.
Johnny Carey was the first person to win the English Footballer of the Year, I think 1948,
As a right back.
as a right back. He captained the Man United FA Cup winning team of 1948, and he was brought up playing, I think it was Gaelic football or Irish, you know, but that's where he came from.
Wow.
And they called him Gentleman Jim, although Johnny Carey, Gentleman John, Gentleman Jim, and ostensibly was a wonderful player.
Brilliant.
So I've got to put him in at
Johnny
the
Carey,
right back,
right back.
Johnny Carey.
Awesome.
Left back would be Tony Dunn.
Tony.
Tony Dunn was, of course, a member of the European Cup winning team
Yep.
of 68. He was bought from Shelbourne in Ireland for £5,000.
£1,000.
And he was probably, hang on a second, I might have to take that one back.
I
I
love
might
that.
have to take that one back because I forgot about Roger Byrne. And Roger Byrne, of course, was the United captain who died in the Munich air crash. And Roger Byrne played for England. Now, if you think about it, the England team going into the 1958 World Cup, Roger Byrne, Duncan Edwards, Tommy Taylor, they were all part of that England team. It is said that had they survived, had they not been in a plane crash, England were favourites to win that World Cup.
Wow.
Yeah. Instead, that World Cup saw the announcement of Pele on the World Cup.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, sorry, I'm going to recant that one and put Roger Byrne
Roger Byrne.
at left
Roger
back.
Byrne is in.
Right. And then my two centre-backs, Bill Foulkes.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Well,
oh.
folks.
And Bill Foulkes, of course, started off as a coal miner. And Bill Foulkes survived the Munich air crash. Bill Foulkes, in terms of appearances for Man United, it is only Giggs, Scholes and Charlton who have played more games. He's number 4 in record appearances for United.
Old folks.
Yeah, so Bill Foulkes played centre-back. And I think
Who
as
partners
his partner would have Nobby Stiles.
Nobby style.
Nobby styles.
Yeah.
Nobby
Hard.
So there's a
win.
lot of metal in that team.
Yeah.
That is a
Strong
That
team.
is a strong team. That is
But
a
you've got
strong
the
team.
flair. But you've got the flair up.
Well,
moving
you know
to
what?
the front.
You've got those front runners that are going to score so many goals
Yes.
that if you let in 5, you're going to score 8.
You just got the
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm thinking to myself, when the two teams play each other,
That was my question
you know,
to you, Doc. Your top 11s versing each other.
yeah.
Matt
It's a
Busby on one touchline, Sir Matt, Sir Alex on the other.
It's a different era. It's a different era. And as Dennis Law said to one of the newer players, he said, if my team played your team, we'd only win 1-0, but that's because I'm 75 years old at the moment.
Oh, it was brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant.
I love it.
Now some substitutes. All right, so we can put in as the substitutes all those that got mentioned. So I'd put Harry Gregg. I would put Tony Dunn. I would put Eddie Coleman. How many is that?
That's
Three.
Then we've got to and we've got to look back earlier in the 50s. Gunner Jack Rowley.
Check.
They called him Gunner. Hey, Jack Rowley. A lot of goals for United.
Just
I think
want to
he's in the
spend a bit on him,
200.
Doc.
I think he's in the 200 club. Jack Rowley scored in the 1948 Cup final. He was a member of United's league winners of 1952. So he would get a place in there. Jack Rowley. How many have I
1,
got
2,
left?
3, 4, 1.
One more. From the Busby era. We've got a full-back.
Maybe someone
We've
towards the
really
end
got
of
a
Samet
centre-back.
Busby's reign that he
Well,
brought
the
in.
end of his reign, he brought in Willie Morgan. From Burnley. And Willie Morgan was almost a George Best lookalike. He also had the long hair. He was a very, very good player. A wide player. I think if my knowledge of the 50s was better, I'd probably come up with someone else from the 50s. If we want to look at another prolific goal scorer who also died at Munich, is Liam Whelan. He was wasn't the number one choice, but he scored lots of goals. Let's go with who I know. We'll put Willie Morgan in.
Willie Morgan.
He'd be very happy with me. And a piece of useless information. Willie Morgan is very, very good friends for some reason with Johnny Mathis, the singer.
That's amazing.
Wow.
How's that for some useless information?
Wow.
I love it.
Wow.
I mean,
And then, going through the 70s, I can't really think of any players that would displace. I might have been a bit harsh because they're not in Busby or Fergie's era,
Yeah, they're
but
in the
Martin
middle.
Buchan, up front, Stuart Pearson, and then, on the wing, Steve Coppell was a great
Steve
number
Coppell.
7. Brian Greenough was a great midfielder, died at a young age of 60. So there were others. Arthur Albiston, almost 500 appearances for United.
Amazing.
What a good
great
players.
right through, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Brilliant players.
Yeah.
And I mean, to the fans of gunning to Old Trafford, you've just been spoiled with an amazing history lesson on Manchester United through the Busby Babes. And then Doc's view on his top 11 under Sir Alex Ferguson. Doc, that was amazing.
Let's go through
Really
Doc,
enjoyed
your captain.
Of
Your
that
captain
team.
of this team, yeah?
Duncan Edwards.
It's not such an easy one.
Is it a tough one? Sorry, Doc.
Look, Bob Charlton captained United for a long time, but I just liked Roger Byrne.
Roger Byrne.
Roger Byrne, captain, left
Yeah.
back. Wow. Awesome. Let's run through it, guys. Dr. Barry Shmeizer, Busby 11, top 11. In the polls, we have Alex Stepney. Doc, if I pronounce it wrong,
No problem.
You just correct me, right?
No problem.
Alex Stepney in the polls, centre back. Bill
Folks.
Folks. Both folks. Then we've got Nobby Styles next to him. On the right back, Johnny Carey. Johnny Carey. We've got Roger Byrne, which will also captain this team. Then Doc went with a 4-3-3. Our centre mid trio, we've got Duncan Edwards, Bobby Charlton, and Paddy Crerand. Right? And then our top 3 strikers up front, wow. Tommy Taylor, Dennis Law, George Best.
What a team.
Amazing stuff. On the bench, we have Harry Gregg, Tony Dunn, Eddie Coleman, Jack Rowley, and Willie Morgan. And obviously, Samet Busby. Wow, what a 11.
With Uncle Eunice assistant.
What Uncle
With
Eunice
Uncle
assistant.
Eunice
So,
assistant.
yes, so Doc is going to be Alex Ferguson's assistant. Uncle Eunice will be Samet Busby. How's that? Amazing stuff. Wow.
But
that
Doc,
was absolutely crazy.
Before
Wow.
we close off here, just 2 questions. One, Samet Busby, and a lot of people might not know, played football for Liverpool Football Club
And Manchester City.
in Manchester City. How did Manchester United get him to come in as a coach and, steal him away from the likes of Liverpool?
Yeah.
And,
So during the Second World War, he was seconded to the army, but he was seconded as a football instructor. And there were a lot of good things about him. And he was co-opted to come. The guy that seems to have been very instrumental in those was a man called Louis Rocca, R-O-C-C-A. And there seemed to have been some communication with them. And I mean, Man United as a club, at the end of the war, Old Trafford was non-existent. It had been bombed to smithereens. And he fancied the idea of a challenge. And he brought with him Jimmy Murphy as his assistant. And they really, and so, when you talk about the greats of the club, it's a wonderful debate. Is it Fergie or is it Busby? So Fergie certainly brought more trophies to the club. But Busby literally resurrected the club from nothing. And then he had to deal still with the Munich.
Yeah.
So I mean, that man, the courage of that man is just
And the
phenomenal.
support from Jimmy Murphy to step in
Unbelievable.
after the Munich.
Jimmy Murphy's the unsung hero.
Yeah.
There have been, I believe, that they're now putting up a statue of him at Old
Well
Trafford,
deserved.
which has come from pressure from various fans. The one leading the charge is this chap called Wayne Barton, who's written a brilliant book about Jimmy Murphy, amongst other books. So he's a very underrated, and you know, he could have been on that plane to Munich, but he was in charge of the Welsh team at
A lot
that
of
time.
unsung heroes at United, like Eric Harrison, that
Yeah,
brought through
yeah,
the
yeah.
class of
Oh,
92.
yes. Oh,
Amazing
Oh, yes.
people that worked undercover to really help grow
Yeah.
Manchester United.
And they are people who are appreciated by those that came into contact with them. But of course, if you ask the modern day fan, tell me about Eric Harrison, you know, he doesn't know the difference between Eric Harrison and George Harrison. So it's,
And then the final one, Doc, before we close it, and I think we touched on it earlier, the conditions that these players played in, you know, the hard tackles,
yeah.
and also the effect, and as a doctor also, you know, the effect that it had on a lot of them, you know, now having Parkinson's and stuff like that. I know Sir Bobby Charlton is struggling with Alzheimer's, I think it is. Nobby Styles complained towards the end as well.
Yeah.
So they played under really tough conditions.
Very, very tough conditions. Training was rudimentary. They often used to train at the stadium itself, train on cement. But, you know, there's story of dementia and heading the ball. This is gaining a lot of traction. And it gained a lot of traction after Jeff Astle, in fact, Jeff Astle scored the winning goal for West Brom in an FA Cup final late 60s or maybe 1970. My memory fails me a bit, maybe heading the ball too much. But the ball in those days was much heavier. It had that lace. But of course, people live longer nowadays. Yeah. So it's not unusual to get into your 80s. So is it as a result of that? If you extrapolate boxing onto this, it probably is. Yes. Because these guys are heading the ball all the time. And I believe now in schools in the UK, certainly, they've stopped it or they're using a much softer ball. So that plays a big role. The pitches were muddy, and also the salaries. The salaries, whilst it was more than the average working man got, wasn't like today. Yeah. And a lot of these guys, when their careers ended, what are they going to do next? They've got no qualifications. It used to be the standing joke, the guy's going to open a pub when he finishes playing football. And you see a lot of these guys, depression, mental illness is a massive thing, but I think it's a bigger thing today because of social media. Yeah. It's a massive, massive thing. So these, at all these clubs, there's psychologists, there are, I saw once at United training, they had an ophthalmic specialist showing players how to gain the most out of looking out of the corner of your eye. Is where the ball's coming from. So, nutritionists, they looked after unbelievably. And when you speak to these guys, fans who were privileged to go and watch in the 50s, the players used to travel by themselves on the public transport, on their bicycles to the football games,
And I think for all the younger fans, you need to appreciate the eras before to understand what these players did for the football club. 100%. And to compare them, like you said, very difficult because the conditions were very
totally
different. And I think these players under the conditions that the modern day plays under would be even more phenomenal than what they already are. Yeah. So,
wow, it was absolutely amazing. Brian, before you take us out, if you guys don't know, we've got the legend, Uncle Yunus Chandra, behind the camera. I'd like to thank you, Uncle Yunus, for everything you do for us in our small little village. You are really our inspiration. Doc,
and if I may just add, it's been absolutely wonderful to see a great friend from so many years ago who remains the absolute gentleman that he has been since the day that I met him.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Uncle Yunus, we really appreciate you. Doc, it has been an absolute honor.
Yes.
Saturday afternoon, mate.
Couldn't have spent it
anywhere better. With our two legends, Uncle Yunus and Dr. Barry.
The honor is mine. And I extend an open invitation to you.
So much, Doc.
We should maybe one day meet up at my offices.
Oh, yes.
And there are a couple of interesting items hanging up there.
Oh, brilliant.
Beautiful.
And Doc, like we always like to say that once you appear on Gunning to Old Trafford, you become family of Gunning to Old Trafford.
Yes.
Fantastic.
So Doc, you are now part
My
of
privilege.
Gunning to Old
My
Trafford.
privilege. My privilege.
And you
Thank
have an open invitation to
Thank
join
you.
us at any time.
Thank you for hosting me. It's a privilege for me.
No, thank you for
so
opening
much.
up your
Thank you.
beautiful house
Wow.
and showing us all of the amazing things, the memorabilia, the collections. And to all our fans, Uncle Eunice is with his camera, took some amazing footage for us that we will be dropping on our socials, so Insta, Twitter, and on YouTube. So look out for that. You're going to be amazed by what's on site here. So really enjoyed it, Doc. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Are
you
we
so
not-
much.
Oh, we're not gunning to Old Trafford?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
no, we are. We're definitely going to.
Definitely. So yeah, guys, Doc, you ready?
Yes.
Ready.
Ibrahim, you ready? On 3, 2, 1. We are
Gunning to Old Trafford.
Thank
you
you.
guys.